Again, more 20 minutes, okay? So,
Hello, Sharks. We are Group Eatal. I'm Nanditha, and here with me are. Hi, I'm Afraa.
I'm Anthony.
I'm Reem.
I'm Prathamesh.
We are here because there's a silent crisis happening inside the hospitals, and almost nobody is talking about them. So, in the hospitals, there's something called Break Glass Override. It's an emergency button. So, when doctors need emergency patient records, they press that button and all the access control gets bypassed. This system is necessary because there needs no technology in between a doctor and a patient's life. But here's where the problem lies. Every time the button is pressed, there is a log that's generated. It has a timestamp, username, and a patient ID. That's it. There's no context as to why it was pressed. There's no or there's no indication of whether that person was there, was supposed to work on that day or not. So thousands of these cases come into compliance officers' desk every day. They can only review few of them. 99% of these cases go unnoticed and they disappear into log files. So this is not a staffing problem. The open EMR log files are completely flat. They don't have risk scoring, they don't have priority scheduling, nor do they have clinical context. So the compliance officer only pulls out random samples and hopes that they can catch something. And here's why this should concern everyone. 70% of the hospital breaches are from insiders, people who wear badges. 76% of the federal enforcement actions state that there is no risk analysis or there is a missing risk analysis. Penalties run up to $2 million per violation. An insider who's snooping medical records for 6 months can violate hundreds of them. The worst part is that these misuse can go unnoticed for months before we know it. The HIPAA standard 164-312B states that we need to demonstrate an oversight. But the hospitals and random samples are not meeting the bar. The hospitals know it, but they don't have an alternative. Until now, we developed Eatal to solve the exact same problem.
Okay, so moving on, our solution overview. So basically our program is going in a four-stage pipeline. First is the ingest. It reads all the operations and does not write anything back to the OpenEMR. Second stage is the scoring. It scores every break glass event and not only score, but it gives a general idea of what was it in a single line. Third is the ranking. Everything is flagged and given rank based on the risk score. Which one is most high priority to the low priority? And lastly, the fourth phase is the alert. So it gives us a basic alert that uh, yeah, there is a break glass event which is actually threatful. So this is basically a solution overview. Moving on. So this is our system architecture, nothing complex. This is our open EMR, which is already there in every hospitals. So here you can see there are three components, which is open EMR application, audit log repository, and read-only database views. So we only take data from two pipelines, which is the audit log repository and the database field. It is read-only, so there's no harm that we can write back any or we can hamper with any of the data. Second is the Eatal, which is our component. So there are a series of actions that our Eatal app does. So first is log ingestions and parsing. It will take log history, audit log report. It will take history from the audit logs, check for every log, and secondly, it will do a context enrichment, which basically means it will write it into a simpler language. Third is the trust and risk scoring. It will score each and every break glass event from high priority to low priority. Fourth is a behavioral drift. So let's say there's a drift between a certain break glass event. It will tell you everything about that as well. Fourth is the evidence packaging. And finally, last component is our review queue. Here you will get a list of, here you will get a clear list of each and every action that a compliance officer needs to go through rather than a list of 50,000 events. And as you can see, these are our design targets, less than half of reduction in the manual audit review. You can get a report in less than 5 minutes. Also, there is little to zero uh, little to zero latency for clinical access. Moving on, I'll give my mic to Reem.
Thank you. So here I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the numbers. For this slide, I'm gonna talk about the difference between or compare between like the Eatal with Eatal and without Eatal. So first of all, Eatal meter is hard to find. There is like a lot of activities that like not clear to tell what like rescue. Also logs like alerted before like it's like if anyone reviews them, which should make it harder to test that data. And then another issue is break glass. Break glass becomes like a routine slowly, which is like becomes slowly routine. Even when it shouldn't be. And then the last thing I'm gonna select here is like over is like the presentation. Everything looks like the same, so it's hard to know what focus on. And then we get here for that one without like with Eatal things changes. So every event is stored, so we can clearly like see which one is higher, like high risk. And then any tampering is caught clearly during an ingestion. And then the system also detect just alerts like usual behavior early before it becomes like a bigger problem. And then finally, only the top high risk events are flagged for review. So teams can like focus on what really matters. And then what makes it different from the others? First, we're gonna go zero touch. Zero touch, we don't verify open MRR at all. There is like no downtime or like no migration. And then non-blocking. Second, the non-blocking, even if it's like stops making or working, clinical care like continue normally working. And then the concepts aware here, we have it's not just like about like who access, it's like the data, it's like whether they should have or not, and then based on like the situation. And then the last thing here we have is defensible. Every score comes with like a clear explanation, so it's easy to justify decisions. And then lastly, we have here it's like how it benefits each group or time group. Compliance officer gets a focused review code instead of going through like everything. And then security teams get alerts before this happens. And then leadership gets practice like reports. And then last thing is regulated auditors can quickly access ready to use evidence.
All right, so right now we're in part one, and right now I'm just showing you that Eatal and OpenEMR are in a fresh state. There's no events available. And in a second here, I'm going to be logging into Dr. One, which is Bob, and he's just going to be viewing a patient named Alex. I made sure that he is on shift and he's had an encounter with Alex. This will make more sense in a second. But basically, once we view our patients and go back to Eatal and then get the data, you're going to see it has a green highlight with a high trust score. And that's because of the rationale that we use. As you can see, we put an emphasis on prior encounter window and whether he's on shift or not. And because he has a high trust score. So next, in a second, at the end of the presentation, if you want more details on the rationale, we have an extra slide that can go into detail for that. And now I'm going to be logging into a second doctor shortly, and he's not going to be on shift, or he's not going to have an encounter with Alex as well. And you're going to see this reflected onto Eatal once I view the patients. And so now once this refreshes, you're going to see he has a red outline, low trust score, and this is reflected onto the rationale as the role shift is 0 and the prior encounter window is also 0. And this just shows that we can use context to rank similar events done by different doctors by trust score to make it so they can easily see what to review. So now in the second part, I'm going to be running a data generator script to kind of simulate how Eatal may look like in an actual hospital environment. And so in a second, you're going to see more logs. And now, so basically we just have everything ranked and filtered by the trust score. See, anything red is a high risk, so below a 40 trust score. Anything yellow is a medium risk between 40 and 75. And when I scroll down, you're going to see some green, which is a low risk. And basically, for hospital like compliance officers or leaders, they're just gonna use this page to quickly and have guidance on what events to manually review. As you can see, we have a dedicated column just to advise people to actually do a manual review, because we don't want Eatal to be used as kind of a sole indicator for whether someone is, an insider threat or abusing the system. We want them to actually do their own manual review after. It's just that we want them to kind of have guidance on what to review, since it's just bare logs in OpenEMR. So now I'm going to be showing the drift data. And basically, this just shows you the ratio between the overrides and standard access per facility or department for a role. And the current ratio just tells you the ratio between override and standard access for the past 90 days. And the baseline is 9 days prior to the current ratio. We compare this because if a facility is normalizing at a higher ratio, then that can clutter the logs, which leads to insider threats or abuse of the break glass mechanism to go unnoticed for a longer time. So using both of these, they can maybe make policy changes to kind of lower override or make decisions on what to review. So next, shortly, I'm going to show kind of our configuration file. And basically, we made Eatal as configurable as possible, all in one place. So as you can see, these are kind of the weights right there for our rationale. We decided to just make the prior encounter emphasized in this demo, but obviously you can configure that to kind of fit your hospital situation and their current environment. And then shortly, this is the audit package. So hospital leaders can give this to regulators, external auditors for them to review. But just for this demo, we decided to just put period star and number of overrides, top end incidents, and the drift alerts. But you can also change this to kind of match what is required by auditors, what they need. And then lastly, we're going to go to OpenEMR as a admin. What you're going to see here is you're going to see the logs that OpenEMR will show. So this will just show the difference between OpenEMR and not using Eatal. As you can see, there are no visual indicators, no trust scores, and just plain black and white text. So this is why we built Eatal. Eatal can help kind of hospital workers to just make quick, informed decisions on what to review in these event logs, and it'll help catch insider threats more quickly. So instead of taking months, it'll take maybe days from using Eatal. And now to Omar.
So basically, just to basically include everything, first, Eatal makes break glass access observable rather than visible. Today, emergency overrides are logged, but not truly analyzed in context. So with Eatal entry, every override is basically scored and prioritized for review. Second is evidence of misuse, which basically surfaces earlier since events are ranked rather than randomly sampled. Since it basically allows compliance teams to basically focus on the highest risk cases rather than just searching through thousands of logs. Third is HIPAA evidence packages they can basically be generated within minutes since contextual metadata and written rationales are automatically assembled. And lastly, and most importantly, is patient safety is never compromised. So Eatal is external and non-blocking, and what that means basically that the emergency access is never delayed, nor restricted. So each override is basically scored transparently with a written rationale. And basically what it does, it makes governance both operationally practical and defensible. In summary, basically, we restore accountability without interfering with clinical care.
Thank you. That's all. If you guys have any questions, please go ahead.
Okay, great. So, any question? Okay, so Isabel, please.
Thank you. And it was a great presentation. Thank you for that. I have a few questions, but I'm going to just ask the first one, and then I'm sure people will have other questions. But the 10,000 events a day number that you cite, is that a real hospital data or extrapolated? Because I don't know if a small clinic running an open EMR generates 10,000 break glass events a day.
No, that's not a full like cited source. It's just kind of to give an idea of how many. Sorry. Kind of to just give an idea of how many logs these compliance officers get like every day, just to set like it's a crazy amount, like not a realistic amount that they can go over. So it's better if we can narrow down the ones that need most attention, and then they can go through those.
Thank you.
So another question? Yes, please.
Yeah. So I may have just missed it, but I know at one point you mentioned that this would be able to catch log tampering. How is that performed? Catching log tampering?
So there are two trust boundaries. One is through the metadata, and then one is through the actual like logs that we're getting. And first of all, I think this is just important to state. We don't get actual like clinical content. Like we only get the most necessary info that we need, which is also one of the HIPAA guidelines. So we're only getting the metadata of what happened. So who accessed whose information, when was it, and why, and then we assign a trust score. So, but to focus more on your question, we implement like snapshot hashing, row count, continuity in these between the like if there was the diagram in the second slide, sorry, the system architecture where it showed the boundaries from the open EMR to Eatal itself. And over there we had a whole threat like analysis done. We came up with 14 threats, and we came up with them using the STRIDE framework. So we took like spoofing, tampering, and assigned it to whichever one of the 6 modules it would line up with. And then if you saw, sorry, let me actually just go back to it. It'll be a little bit easier. So if you see on the bottom over there, it says threat 1, 4, and 14, and that's for trust boundary 1. So it was just, for the sake of time, like we can't go over all 14 threats right now, but we did focus on threat 7. So right here, Thread 7 was unauthorized disclosure of the PHI adjacent data from Eatal. So again, like I said, they don't store the actual clinical content, but it stores the metadata about access. So what we have here is that we show this is more focusing on what could actually attack our system itself and what we have put in to stop that or at least try to prevent it. So the direct unauthorized access, basically like someone, a hacker tries to just break in and steal the data. And then we have the inference attack, which is someone analyze the who accessed what patterns to figure out things that they shouldn't have known. So like that's like an example of the escalation of privilege. And then the insider privilege user also kind of adding on to that is someone with legitimate access uses it for illegitimate purposes. So then we have it, each of the leaf nodes are a KPAC MITRE attack. So 560, the first one, that one is the use of known domain credentials. So basically using stolen credentials to get access. And then the missing role base, that's the KPAC 122, the privilege abuse. And that's also the same for the fifth one all the way at the end, the governance report accessible. And then we have KPAC 117, which was the interception. And then we also have the KPAC 180 all the way on the right. That's the exploiting incorrectly configured access control. And then we have mitigations built in for all of these. So we have RBAC, which it basically just means that only authorized roles, so like the compliance officers, the security operation center can read these outputs, and this defends against the branch 1 and 5. And then we also have encryption at rest and in transit. So the Eatal output storage and evidence package transmissions are encrypted, and this will defend us against branches 1, 4, and 6. And then we also have pseudonymized patient IDs. So even if output does get leaked, all of the patient identity is secure. So like what it just means is they take, if you have a patient in the name, it replaces the name with a unique or random hash. And then we also have, like I already stated, the minimum necessary metadata only. So only what's needed for the governance storing, not the full clinical data. And that just limits any damage. And then for we also have audit logging on Eatal itself. So this is the meta governance. Every access to Eatal is also logged. So it'll defend against each of these 6 branches by deterring and detecting insider abuse. Sorry, I hope that answered the question. I really yeah.
I was wondering, so you had that log and you did a good job demonstrating the different risk scores that can occur with your different doctors. It brought up this concept that I think you might have 2 different use cases, or like as a reviewer of that, I might have 2 different use cases. One would be I've got an acute event that might be occurring, like a brute force attack or something, and all of a sudden all this data's coming in, and I know something's definitely wrong. Let me go solve that right away. Second situation could be, I know that I've got this one doctor that is exhibiting some very strange behavior, and I want to watch him for a while, and I want to track his behavior and find out, what's really going on. I guess my question is, do you have some sort of a different log interface that demonstrates that trend, the trend graphics, or something more than just an individual line item, so that I can see overall behaviors?
Yeah. Okay, so like right now we don't have kind of like a trend analysis for a second scenario. Right now, we just have just simple alerts that will tell you kind of if this may be happening, and then you do the review yourself. We just wanted to keep Eatal simple, just so you can get alerts, and then you do the manual review yourself. Can you repeat situation 1?
Situation 1 is like brute force. There's a ton of data coming in because something is wrong. And it's less related to a doctor, and it's more like the attack is occurring.
Well, in our log ingestion, you would get an alert if the volume is greater than 2x like the standard or half of the standard as well, just in case someone is tampering and removing the logs, or in your case, for forcing and just kind of cluttering the system with logs.
Okay, Gabriel, please.
Hey, congrats for the work. Very interesting. First, I'd just like to actually share a quick recommendation. I mean, it's always, at least my perception, right? It's always a good practice to always number slides, because when people want to ask a question, they can just refer to the numbers. So just, this is a small thing, but worth noting, yes. Okay, so you mentioned you do encryption at rest, right? Could you please elaborate a little bit more on how did you implement the encryption at rest? And if possible, if you could also elaborate a little bit more how you are processing and getting the different data out of the logs coming from OpenEMR.
But for the first part, encryption at rest, I kind of don't really remember. But what was the second part? Yeah.
Yes, second part is if you can elaborate a little bit more how you are actually processing the data from EMR to get the different ranks.
Oh, so we just connect directly to the OpenEMR database, the Meridian database, and then we just kind of picked like what we thought would be the most indicative of suspicious logs or suspicious activity, and then we weight each one, and then that would be the trust score.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Any other thing, Gabriel?
I'm sorry?
Any other thing?
No, that's fine. I have other questions here as well, but I think it's better to let others to speak as well. Same as Isabel told.
Okay, thank you. So any other question? Okay, let's see. Okay.
Alex, Jose has had his hand raised for a while.
Okay. Okay, perfect, please.
Okay. All right. It's okay. Congratulations for the work. It's really interesting. And I'm really interested in more how things work behind the scenes, right? Especially if you go back to slide number 3, you talk about score, rank, and alert, right? In my view, in the last line there, in the alert, of course, you have some rules to make a decision, right? To interpret the score, the ranks, and then maybe you have some rules there to decide or to identify something, right? My question is, how do you represent these rules, or how are these things represented there, right? I have another question, but I need an answer for this first question, right?
So
Please.
in the drift alert, or what?
The question is, for example, you generate this score, no? So
Yeah.
you have this score. How do you represent the data to generate this score? For example, you have a hook. How do you?
Yeah, how to identify something, right? How to identify a drift in there, right?
Oh,
How
okay.
how do you represent the things to identify a drift in there?
Well, in our drift alert, we just made it so that if it crossed the, okay, so in the drift, it's a ratio between override and standard access. And then we also present, we compare the baseline, which is 90 days before the current ratio, which is 90 days before the current day. And basically, if it just passes over a threshold, and in our demo, we made it 0.2, but again, this is configurable, then it'll show the alert on that page.
Correct, but you have rules, right, to represent these things. For instance, let's say to make a decision of going out or not. So you have to assess the weather. Okay, it's raining or not. It's a sunny day and whatever. And then you have a sort of rules, right, to represent the way you make a decision, right? My point is, how do you represent these things here, right, to make a decision? Because of course you have a score, rank, but in my view, you combine the things in a rule or in a set of rules to produce an alert, right? And this production of an alert is a consequence of a decision. You know, it's a consequence of a value you got from your system, and then based on this value, you can issue or not an alert.
I'm gonna go to the back side.
No, if it's complicated, you can skip it.
Oh wait, we have the slide. I think it should kind of answer what you were asking. So
Can I maybe help you or maybe make it more proper? So you tried their use in some slide about base.
yeah.
I understood that you maybe try to translate the category in a Bayesian representation. Am I correct? Yes, it's the one you made. Yes, I believe to start to answer Dr. Farid, it's the one he asked. How can you infer that you have one alert or not? So, and I think your answer try to explain the combination of the category and the base representation. I believe each is what he asked.
So the Bayesian model is a math back-end way of estimating how often insider misuse goes undetected. So we did this using a tool called Genie, and we plugged in industry-derived probabilities for things like insider threat rates or audit review rates, and also detection capability. And then what we did is we put in, like, for example, on the first slide, it said, I think it was 90%. Sorry.
No, 70%.
It was 70% of insider attacks occur. So we put those into Genie, and then the model worked through them and produced us a posterior probability of about 72%. So that's what you see on the bottom. And that just means that under these assumptions, about 3 out of 4 insider misuse cases go undetected. And then if you're asking more about that, like each value that we got, this kind of explains what Anthony was trying to say. So we have okay, so so we have 5 different like things that we got like in a rate on. So first of all, we have the role shift in identity, and what all this is asking is it looks at a log, and it says, was this clinician even supposed, did they even have a shift that day? Because obviously if they weren't even scheduled for a shift, that already raises risk. And then the encounter and clinical one is basically asking, on that day that there was this break glass document, was there also an encounter with that patient? Because if there was, that would mean there's a lower risk since the patient was already seen and it's known that there's something going on. But if there wasn't, that's a higher risk. And then the temporal and shift is was it during peak hours? So was it from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.? And I know like hospitals are open 24/7, the emergency room, but there is a time period where it's at its peak. Doctors are most busy. There's probably the most people coming in. So that's probably a good reason why someone would need to use break glass because, you know, not every doctor that's assigned to their patient is going to be able to go and help them right away. But if it's not during peak hours, that does raise a risk. And then peer comparison is this is literally comparing one user's override rate to the peers in their department. Because obviously, if someone has a 20% and someone like 5%, and then someone else has a 50%, it's probably better to check in on why this person has such a high rate of using break glass. And then lastly, prior encounter window. This is what we weighted the heaviest because we're trying to figure out if a doctor and a patient had like the user that used the break glass on this patient, if they had a prior encounter within the last 10 days, because then it makes sense that, okay, they were seeing this patient, so that's why they went ahead and helped them out, but like because of situation they had to use break glass. But if there wasn't, then that increases our risk. So putting all of those together, that's how we get our overall output trust score of 0 to 100. And just again, the lower score means it needs review, it's less trusted.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.